हाँ चलो. So this is the all-new Hyundai Verna, and this is going to be an all-new style of doing this first drive review. I don't know why, because every single first drive review is starting to sound the exact same. So I'll tell you this. Don't like this video, don't share it, don't subscribe to the channel, don't do any of that. But one thing I need you to do is watch this video right till the end and tell me if this format works for you. Agreed? Are we in agreement? All right, done. So this is the all-new Hyundai Verna, and before we go any further, the first thing that we need to set is a little bit of context. What exactly is it that Hyundai was trying to achieve with this generation of this car? Well, you have to understand that the segment itself is sort of changing, and what Hyundai is trying to do is move up a size. If you remember the old Verna, the sort of limitation with that was that it was quite literally a compact sedan, not all that family friendly. So what they have done with this generation is move it up a size and get it somewhere in between where the Verna was and where the Elantra itself was as well. Makes sense? And subsequently, what we've seen is that this car has grown in dimensions quite a bit. It does feel like a big car now, especially in terms of the wheelbase. But again, it's not like it's grown a full foot longer or something. The wheelbase has gone up by 70 millimeters. That's about this much. So it's more about how they've optimized the space and practicality package and designed this car brand new from the ground up. But that's all technical stuff. The one thing I need to understand is, why do you guys not like the look of this car so much? I've seen the internet chatter. You guys are like, oh, it's ugly, I don't like it, it's too polarizing, it's too overdone. And I'll agree with you on one point. If you compare this to a Ciaz, to a Slavia, to a Virtus, even the City, those car designs are a lot more neutral, and I will agree with the fact that they will probably age better. This thing, it does feel like it's got a lot going on. Oh yeah, the most obvious thing. You guys said that this thing is a very polarizing design, but I've got your comments from when the Creta was first released as well. You had the exact same thing to say over there, that the design was too controversial, too overdone, and that SUV went on to be a sales dud, did it? Let's continue by focusing on what was the most controversial and conversational bit about this new generation of the Verna, and that is the looks. And within that, most of the promotions that you would have seen is about this Robocop looking front LED DRL setup. But here's an interesting factor that I learned today. This all is not the LED DRL. This is a pilot light, and these are the LED DRLs. And honestly speaking, with just these slits on towards the side, it does look a lot nicer. Don't you think so? And lower down, you spot this whole mesh design and obviously a lot of design elements trousseaued into the front end, and this LED multi-reflector headlight setup. Now, interestingly, over to the side, you'll spot these 16-inch alloy wheels. They've got this black finish and a red brake caliper up front, but that is something specifically seen with the turbo. If you get the 1.5 naturally aspirated, that one's grayish or silver. But an interesting factoid, this particular car, it's running TN number plates. But an insider source has confirmed to me that if you switch that number plate to CH or PB, the wheels automatically go up to 23 inches and they get wheel spacers added. Let me know if you got that reference. Now, based on what I've largely seen, people have got very differing opinions. Some people hate the front, other people hate the rear, which is why it's very difficult to get a consensus on this. But in my personal opinion, it's the side profile that seems the most controversial to me. What I do like is the shape of the mirrors. I like that the door handles are nice and chunky, but they haven't got a chrome finish. They've got this dull silver finish, which in my opinion does work with just about any color that you pair it with. What is weird though is how, well, basically this half of the car feels like it's flat, slender, sleek, and belongs to one car, and over here it suddenly turns into a Hyundai Tucson. It's got these bulbous, muscly haunches, so it kind of feels like the front end of one car has reversed into the rear end of another. It's something similar that we had seen with the Alcazar, where it does feel like the front and rear belong to two different cars entirely, and that for me is that little point of controversy. But it's at the rear end where the maximum amount of styling is going on, and that's not just a function of this kind of fastback design that you have for the roofline or the kind of cuts and creases that have been carved into the sheet metal. Just look at the lighting cluster itself. There is so much happening within this. You've got this connected LED setup at the rear like we've seen in many Hyundai models and like the front of the car as well. If you look at these elements right here, they're not part of the tail light. These are the brake lights. How cool is that? Then this set of slits over here on either side. This bit right here is the reversing light, and these right here are the indicators. So they've managed to involve a lot of designing, a lot of styling, a lot of sort of mystery with the lighting elements themselves. And since we are on the topic of how big this car is, how practical it's become, how family friendly it is, the boot space. Plenty generous now at 528 liters, and they've even paid attention to the fact that the boot opening with the old Verna was a lot smaller, and now it's wider and much easier to load. Two things, one positive, one negative. There is a bit of a loading lip, so you do have to kind of lift luggage and put it in. But secondly, 528 liters. This is the kind of boot space that the sedan segment is giving you, which even the most practical compact SUV will not. Time to move inside. Of all the things that we were expecting today, rain wasn't one of them. So anyway, let's talk about the rear seat now, because that is a big highlight in this generation of the Verna. The first thing to note is that yes, this is a sedan, so it's not going to be as high up to get inside as an SUV, but it's still not that low, not as knee heavy to get inside, so it's quite comfortable in that sense. Once you're in the back seat, the first thing that I like about here is the seat contouring. They've managed to get the framing and the spread of the seat cushioning really nice. The cushioning's got a nice little firm edge to it, and the contours are well defined. Not to mention, they've taken a page out of the Aura or Grand and Neos's book in that way, because the seat base itself, it's got this slight upward edge to it, so you do land up getting good under-thigh support. On that line, if you compare this seat contouring to something like a Virtus or Slavia, they are a lot more supportive, a lot more sort of holding you in place. But then again, that is because they're very focused on seating 4. If you have a heftier build like me, this kind of seat contouring will feel a lot more comfortable. You compare this to what I feel is one of the benchmarks when it comes to knee room or legroom in the segment, and that is the Honda City. In that place, the Honda City does have a little bit of an edge when it comes to knee room, but bear in mind this front seat is set to Amesh driving position. I'm 6'5", he is 6 feet tall, and I still have knee room to spare. That's definitely saying something, not just for a Verna, but the segment in general. And if you're going to talk about amenities now, you do have rear AC vents along with a phone holder, 2 USB Type-C charge ports. There's a rear sun blind. Unfortunately, no sun blinds given for the window, which kind of feels a little bit un-Hyundai. But headline, this has now gone from being one of the least impressive back seats to one of the most. One more thing I wanted to point out. Yeah, if you prefer upright seating positions, this may not feel all that comfortable for you. And one more thing, because I don't want to leave this for a voiceover, the headroom in this Verna, especially compared to something like a Honda City, quite impressive. So onward to the front row, and the first thing that I will observe here is that the Verna's dashboard looks the most futuristic in this segment. Operating word here being looks. If I were to talk about the touch and feel and general experience of premiumness, on that front I would still give the Honda City an edge. Compared to something like a Virtus or Slavia, there's not much separating these three cars when it comes to the plastic quality, but Hyundai has been a lot more generous with the kind of leatherette or soft touch padding that they've used on the dashboard, the door armrest, and even the central armrest right here. One point to note, and this is from the perspective of someone who is by Indian standards exceptionally tall, is that this front seat is quite comfortable for tall drivers. Two key things that go into that. Number one, the center console doesn't land up fouling with your left knee, and the floor box itself is quite generously sized. So even if you're driving a manual version like this, it is still convenient to operate all the floor pedals and even get the gear in place. Now, obviously, if we are talking about a Hyundai, we can't talk or can't avoid talking about the features, and this car, as you'd expect, is loaded. Now, every single review that we do, we'll always touch upon the touchscreen, upon the digital instrument cluster, all that stuff. We'll get there. For me, the most interesting thing in this car though is the ambient lighting system. There are 64 colors here, which is definitely a big talking point, though realistically you'll end up using like what, 4 colors. And interestingly, the ambient lighting itself is integrated both underneath the AC console as well as the door pads themselves. And if you open up these door pads, that's when the ambient lighting actually goes off for some reason. And that's also a sort of hint of how playful Hyundai is getting with their new generation of cars. So they've done that with the AC console as well. So typically you just have auto AC, all those buttons, whatnot, reasonable. But over here you'll spot this little button that shows a navigation or some sort of arrow input, as well as this. So if I tap this, it moves from the AC controls to the infotainment control. So you've got these little bit of shortcuts happening. So one side, this is turning into the fan speed, one tap, it's tuner. This side is the AC control, tap it, is the volume knob. So definitely quite interesting and more handy for the front passenger than the driver, because I've obviously got steering mounted controls here. But generally speaking, the infotainment system, no issues whatsoever. Super crisp, very easy to use, no lag, and that's very positive to see. But at the same time, while you do have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay and a wireless phone charger, those two functions themselves are not wirelessly supported. Continuing on with the amenities, you have a sunroof, powered driver's seat. A little bit of a weird thing with the powered driver's seat too, wherein the fore and aft action as well as the backrest is moving electrically, but the height adjustment still manual. I don't know why they do that. It's a very weird sort of cost-cutting solution. And then you do have heated and ventilated front seats. The key thing to note is that these ventilated seats are actually quiet. Right now, it's on the maximum setting. I'm just going to stay silent for a bit. It's on the maximum setting right now, so that's definitely impressive. And what else? The instrument cluster. Now, this is a sort of sore point for me because yes, it is digital, but it's similar to the display that we saw in the Venue. You even have interactive sort of displays wherein if I tap the drive modes, it'll move from red with sport, blue in city, and sort of turquoise if you go to eco mode. But this should have got the Alcazar's driver information display. That interactivity of the display is just so much richer, so much more premium. One thing that I'm quite happy about is that Hyundai's paid attention to the little things. So you have USB Type-C chargers at the front and rear as well as USB Type-A, and obviously you do have power windows as well. But all of these bits have got backlighting, and that is often a point where a lot of manufacturers land up going in for some kind of ridiculous cost cutting. And the safety package is also a lot stronger now, right from the base variant. So stuff like rear parking sensors, ABS with EBD, and 6 airbags, which will become mandatory later on in this year, are also coming as standard. And as you move to the one above base variant, stability control, hill hold assist, all of these features start getting added. And you add parking sensors at the rear and the front. You also get a rear camera, great resolution, but no surround view camera. But of course, the biggest highlight when it comes to the safety packaging of the new generation Verna is that this gets advanced driver assistance features. So the ADAS system is something that we have to check out when we go out for a drive. You know what? Why are we waiting for? Let's go for it. On to the driving bits then, and first let's talk about ADAS. And the highlight here is that Hyundai has managed to get the calibration of the ADAS system bang on for Indian conditions. Adaptive cruise control, for example. Now that is something I do not have in this particular version, the 1.5 IVT, because that is something exclusively offered with the turbo DCT. Fortunately, I have driven it, I have tested it out, and in that car, the minimum distance that it will maintain is about 2.5 to 3 cars. But in the event that you're driving on a highway and somebody does cut in between, which, let's face it, does happen pretty often on Indian roads, the system slows down very gradually, very progressively, and very predictably so. It doesn't suddenly panic brake or feel jerky or completely out of its wits, which does happen with a lot of ADAS systems, specifically when they have to operate in India. And even auto emergency braking, which you do get across the range, it's quite intelligent in the way that it's been calibrated with the speed sensitivity. So it knows when you get close to a car, you're within maybe half a car's distance, when it needs to warn you about a collision and when it needs to intervene itself and panic brake. So in that context, the ADAS system in this car has been calibrated to be more India friendly than in, say, a Honda City, which as of now is the only other car that offers ADAS in this segment. One thing about this system that's impressed me the most though is lane keeping aid. So right now, if I go ahead and engage it, where thankfully on a road that has lane markings quite nicely marked out, and I let go of the steering, the car is maintaining dead center of this lane by itself with no corrective inputs from my side. A lot of lane keeping aid systems, what they'll do is the car will start deviating and then land up ricocheting from the lane marking that the radar and or camera is detecting. Over here, without any input from my side, it's maintaining dead center. And yes, it does do this as the road curvature also moves on highways, even at speeds of 8,500 kilometers per hour. Similarly, as an extension to this, if you shift lanes and it's a situation where you don't have the opportunity to indicate, the assistance from the steering, the corrective input to make sure that you stay in the lane is a lot more mild. It's still very apparent, but it's also not so obtrusive, nor is it throwing you into the opposite lane, which does happen with a lot of other ADAS systems. Now the big question, you don't have diesel anymore. What you do have is a 1.5 litre naturally aspirated petrol, 4-cylinder, 1.5 turbocharged petrol, again 4-cylinder. Which one of these engines would I pick and for what use? And now this is my experience based off driving the 1.5 turbo, both DCT and manual, as well as this right now, the 1.5 IVT or CVT. I would say this, if you're looking for the smoothest city commuter, hands down that would have to be the 1.5 IVT. The throttle is a lot more progressive, it's a lot more city friendly, especially if you're driving a lot in traffic. And it's not like it's lacking for performance, it'll even get up to 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour quite easily. The only catch is that when you say go for an overtake from 40 to 60 kilometers per hour, the engine's going to be a lot more vocal while doing that. It's not lacking for performance. Even the gear shift itself, it does mimic sort of those kick down actions. But if you're looking at a lot of extensive highway travel, those overtakes will make the engine feel more vocal to you. And that for me is where the value addition of the 1.5 turbo comes in, manual or DCT. It's got the performance on tap, and even so, I would say this, that I wouldn't categorize it as an enthusiast car outright, because in that turbo, if you punch the throttle, go all out on the throttle with the manual or the DCT, there's never any throw you back into the seat sort of action that maybe the 160 horsepower output on paper would suggest. It's still very progressive and very easy to get used to. Simultaneously, it's not feeling jerky or hard to control even in city driving conditions. It's just that the naturally aspirated petrol is that one bit easier. Specifically talking about the DCT, gear changes are insanely smooth, especially upshifts. And even if you were to go for hard downshifts with that turbo, the kickdown action is managed quite smoothly, and even head nod is controlled quite well on that front. So broadly speaking, regular city commuting, slow traffic, the 1.5 IVT will be good. The reason to go for the turbo is twofold. One, you want the sportier sort of looking exterior and interior. Two, you have a lot of extensive highway travel wherein you want that extra punch to cruise at higher speeds more easily, but more importantly, manage overtakes even more so. So Hyundai's had a lot of talk about this car being ferocious and futuristic, but in my honest opinion, the one word that aptly applies here is balanced. It's got the space and practicality to keep the whole family happy. The features package is both sensible as well as rich. The engines offer the right blend of usability as well as performance, and even halo bits of tech like ADAS have been calibrated to make you adopt them, and happily so. The one point of polarization that could become a situation with this car, the looks. And that's a matter of personal opinion. That aside, I have no hesitation in recommending this car. So, as promised before, if you like this new format of doing first drive reviews, go ahead and let us know in the comment section down below. And especially if you did not like it, let us know in the comment section down below once again. And as always, like, share and subscribe.